cold morning. I know it's hard to get enthusiasm, but we are here together. Special welcome to visitors and those who might be joining us for the first time. We invite you downstairs after the service or to stay online for some community time. And today we have a special great joy of welcoming our music director, Polly Oliver, back to the choir. We have missed you, Polly. So our mission here at First Parish in Wayland is to build community, to search for meaning, deepen our spirituality, and make a better world. If you have questions about First Parish or Unitarian Universalism, someone from our membership team will be downstairs and during social hour to answer your questions. The Reverend Deborah Bennett and our Director of Lifespan Education, Kate Holland, will also be happy to answer questions, and we'd love to meet you at some point. We are fortunate today to have the Reverend Mary Margaret Earl with us in the pulpit. The Reverend Mary Margaret has served as Executive Director and Senior Minister of the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry for 9 years. In this ministry, she strengthens connections between UUs and the Roxbury neighborhood, where the UUUM operates. She's served on the leadership team of Moral Movement Massachusetts, the Roxbury Cultural Network, and currently serves on the search committee for the new Roxbury Community College president. Prior to her arrival at the UU Urban Ministry, she spent 10 years as a faith-based nonprofit in Rhode Island, serving the homeless community. She's past president of the board of the Rhode Island Coalition for the Homeless, recipient of the Heroes of the Faith Award from the Rhode Island State Council of Churches for her interfaith work, and received a Courage of Conscience Award from the Peace Abbey in Sherburne, Mass. She's a longtime vegan committed to standing up for non-human animals. So you see, we have quite a treat in store for us this morning. A big thanks to all our service participants whose names are in the order of service. And please remember to silence those frisky cell phones for this time. Let's take a moment to say hello to one another and a special wave to our online friends, to the camera up there. And now let us breathe a moment. Just breathe in together. Inhale peace and exhale love as we center ourselves and turn our hearts and minds to worship.
Please fix the crackling door. Please fix the crackling noise on Zoom.
Did you too see it, drifting all night on the black river? Did you see it in the morning, rising into the silvery air, an armful of white blossoms, a perfect commotion of silk and linen as it leaned into the bondage of its wings, a snowbank, a bank of lilies biting the air with its black beak? Did you hear it fluting and whistling, a shrill, dark music like the rain pelting the trees, like a waterfall knifing down the black ledges? And did you see it finally just under the clouds, a white cross streaming across the sky, its feet like black leaves, its wings like the stretching light of the river? And did you feel it in your heart how it pertained to everything? And have you too finally figured out what beauty is for? And have you changed your life? So ends our reading. I invite you to join me in singing hymn number 188, Come, Come, Whoever You Are.
Guess what? It's around. Okay, so in case there's anyone in the room who does not know the drill, we're going to break into 4 choruses. The first chorus is going to be from the divider to the window. The second chorus from the divider to the aisle, aisle to divider to window. We're going to have Polly play it through once for us. Then we're all going to sing it together once in unison. And then this group is going to start singing it in rounds. And I will bring each of you in when it's your time to sing from the beginning. We'll sing it through 2 whole times. And for extra credit at the end, when your group is done singing, you can repeat the last phrase until everybody's done. All right? Wish us luck.
Well done.
Our story this morning is a true one, adapted from Fly High, the story of Bessie Coleman, written by Louise Borden and Mary Kay Kroger. So Bessie Coleman was born in Texas way back in 1892. That's 132 years ago. Her parents were sharecroppers, which meant that they were farmers who worked very hard, but they did not own the land they farmed. And Bessie was not their first child or the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. She was their 10th child. And they went on to have 3 more children after Bessie, so you can imagine there wasn't a lot of money or clothing or food when Bessie was growing up. Each day she would walk 4 miles to a 1-room schoolhouse and then 4 miles back home. But Bessie didn't mind. She loved to learn to read and write, and she was very, very good at math. Every August to October, the school would be closed so the children could help their families in the fields picking cotton. And each evening, Bessie would stand right next to the foreman's desk, and she would watch as the cotton that her family had picked was counted and weighed, and she made sure they got every penny they deserved. Now, Bessie's little 1-room schoolhouse only went through 8th grade, and she wanted to continue her education. She told her mama that she wanted to be somebody someday. Everyone said, "Oh, no, you can't do it. You were the 10th of 13 children. Your mama was born to a slave. Your parents can't read or write. Your skin is dark, and you are a woman." Bessie didn't listen. She saved money, and she took herself to university in Oklahoma. But she didn't realize just how expensive it would be to stay there. And so after only a few months, she had to come back home. And she heard it again. "We told you, you can't do it. You are the 10th of 13 children. Your mama was born to a slave. Your parents can't read or write. Your skin is dark, and you are a woman." Bessie saved and saved for years and years. Until she was 23, she moved to Chicago all by herself. She learned to trim nails, and she got a job in a men's barbershop. And as Bessie worked, she would listen to the men who came in. She would listen to their stories, especially stories about World War I. And she heard about men who were up in the air in planes. They were pilots. Wow, thought Bessie, that's what I want to do. If I could learn to fly, I would be somebody. Fly so far, fly so high, a free spirit in the sky. And she heard it again. "Oh, no, you can't do it. You are the 10th of 13 children. Your mama was born to a slave. Your parents can't read or write. Your skin is dark, and you are a woman." She continued to save money until she had enough money. But the people were right. There was a problem because she was a woman. At that time in the United States, you simply could not become a pilot if you were a woman. So Bessie had to sail across the Atlantic on a boat to France, where she went to pilot school. And each day there, she had to walk 9 miles to the airfield and 9 miles home for her pilot training. She didn't care, though. She was learning to fly. And she finished her training, and she got her international pilot's license. Fly so far, fly so high, a free spirit in the sky. She was somebody. And she took another boat back to the United States, and when she got to the dock, the boat docked, there were crowds of people clapping and cheering for her because she was the very first African-American woman in the world to earn a pilot's license. Bessie wasn't done. She went back to Europe, this time to Germany. She learned to do stunts in her plane, barrel rolls and figure eights, and swoop really low to the ground. She came back to the United States and began to do air shows. Everyone called her Brave Bessie. Fly so far, fly so high, a free spirit in the sky. But the best part of all for Bessie was every place she did an air show, she would go to the schools, and she would talk to the children, especially the girls. And she would say to them, "You too, each one of you, every one of you, can be somebody someday. Don't you listen to anyone who tells you you can't. All you need is a dream, and hold fast to that dream every day, and you can be somebody. Fly so far, fly so high, a free spirit in the sky." And now our Sikh friends and their helpers will go downstairs.
morning. I'm Ted Barnes. My pronouns are he, his, him, and I'm a lay minister of this congregation, and yes, I'm in the thick of my Ahab period. This is a time in our service we set aside to acknowledge the joys and sorrows that we hold. In both our sharing and in our witness, we affirm our covenant to care for one another. Each Sunday, we light a vigil candle in recognition of the pain and suffering being experienced around the world due to ongoing war and violence. May this small act help us unite in our prayer for the end of all suffering. If you have a personal joy or sorrow you'd like to share, please feel welcome to come up now or raise your hand and I'll bring you the mic if that's easier.
I invite us into a time of quiet and meditation to breathe in, settle into where we are sitting, relax our shoulders, and just know in this moment that all we need to do is be present. That which is bigger than we are by whatever name we use. We gather in this space during times of great challenge and worry and sadness. And we lift up all those things that make us restless at night and that weigh on our hearts this morning. Those things in the bigger world and also those things in our own personal lives. We lift up to the flickers of hope that shine before us, new life, the strength of community, the naming of what we care about. And all of this, the worry, the sadness, the hopes, we lift up as we enter together into a time of shared love, shared quiet, shared moment of community. May we enter the quiet together. Amen. This morning, I will begin with a reading from the book Wild by author Cheryl Strayed. So Cheryl Strayed hiked 1,110 miles of the Pacific Crest Trail in a pilgrimage to heal her life's hurts, most especially the quick death of her 45-year-old mother to cancer when Cheryl was just 21. She went ill-prepared and too heavily loaded, quickly feeling the pain of that. 2 small boots wrecking her feet, a too heavy pack leaving her hips bleeding and raw and her back bent, and still she walked. She claimed a cast-off hiking pole to steady her. She lightened her load, shedding what was not essential. Her legs grew stronger. And still, it never got easy, not even to the end. In the second week of the journey, she wrote this, quote, "It was day 1 of week 2, officially summer, the last week of June, and I was not only in a different season, but in a different country too, ascending higher in the South Sierra wilderness. In the 40 miles between Kennedy Meadows and Trail Pass, I'd climbed from an elevation of just over 6,100 feet to nearly 11,000. Even in the heat of the first afternoon back on the trail, I could feel an edge of cool in the air that would no doubt envelop me at night. There was no question that I was in the Sierra now, Muir's beloved range of light. I walked beneath great, dark trees that put the smaller plants beneath in almost complete shadow, and past wide, grassy meadows of wildflowers. I scrambled over snow-melt streams by stepping from one unsteady rock to another, aided by my ski pole. At foot speed, the Sierra Nevada seemed, just barely, surmountable. I could always take another step. It was only when I rounded a bend and glimpsed the white peaks ahead that I doubted my abilities. Only when I thought of how far I had yet to go that I lost faith that I would get there." So ends our reading. So it is lovely to return to Wayland again. I need to count how many years I have come. I know it was interrupted a bit by COVID, but I've been here a few times now, and it's good to be back with you. It's good to be here to update you on the work of the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry, and also it's good to thank you for the ways that you have sustained and connected with our work through the years. So Wayland has some wonderful delegates who represent Wayland at the Urban Ministry and who bring our news to you, and they are Lee Anderson and Susan Crowley-Bechtel, so thank you for serving in those roles. As a congregation for many years, and some of you may recall, you once annually undertook a workday on our campus. Who remembers workday from back in the day? Quite a few. And you would come and clean up branches. We need some of that right now. We have some branches down. You built stairs, you cleaned out old records, whatever needed it, you did it. A few years ago, through the Lydia Mariah Child Fund, you helped us make our new Peace Garden disabled accessible. And I want to say a little bit more about Lydia Mariah Child in a bit. Among steadfast Wayland friends are those like John and Molly Beard, Charlie and Lee Anderson, Natalie and John Thompson, Ross and Lynn Trimby, Barbara Buell, Marilyn Kaczarski, Linda and Steve Collins. And from Wayland emerged 2 very important, steadfast leaders at the Urban Ministry. One, who I was surprised to see this morning, our longtime board chair, Chris Nelson, and also our longtime board scribe and thoughtful champion, the Reverend Ken Sawyer. So for all the ways that you have been involved in supporting our work, I thank you, and it is good to be here with you. And this morning, I want to begin with a question. How is your heart? I mean, how are you and how is your heart? How is your heart in the midst of the hard news and the bad news and all the challenges, climate change, political tensions, international news, all of it? How is your heart that has been called, has always been called to respond to a world that is in need of love and justice? How are you? So I lift this up as we deepen our worship together this morning. And I begin with a trip last summer when I passed through Auburn, New York, which is a stone's throw from my hometown in upstate. In the stunning quiet and the shimmer of the Finger Lakes near Lake Cayuga's shores, I spotted a sign on Route 34 for the Harriet Tubman House. Intrigued, I stopped in. Of course I knew Harriet Tubman, called the Moses of her people, the woman who claimed her freedom from enslavement and led others through the dark by the light of the North Star to freedom too. I remembered her image in children's books, but not much else, and certainly not that she had once lived so near my childhood places. Harriet, born Araminta Ross on the eastern shore of the slave state of Maryland, had deep ties in Boston. She visited this region many times, building a network of support and friendship that sustained her efforts to lead others to freedom. One of her friends was Lydia Mariah Child of Wayland. And Harriet retired to Auburn on land from her friend William Seward, who was Lincoln's Secretary of State and an Auburn son. The AME Zion Church bought her home and is restoring it now as a landmark. And the day I visited, an AME pastor led a tour of the property, sharing the contours of Tubman's life 110 years after she had died there. Half hours of stories inspired me to learn more, and so I read 2 biographies and Googled details endlessly. The details of her life made the madness of enslavement more vivid and real. Stories of how she was rented out as a 5-year-old child to tend to a white newborn on another plantation and was beaten if the baby awakened and cried in the night. How she, as a small child, sneaked a sugar cube and had to hide in a pig pen for days to avoid the violence awaiting her as punishment. Of the brain injury she suffered when an enslaver hurled a metal weight at another enslaved person and struck her in the head. Some have theorized that the vision she had of God calling her to her daring work resulted from that injury. And how Harriet, as she renamed herself, rose out of this insane system and claimed her freedom, left her family, a beloved husband, all she knew, to arrive in Philadelphia. She walked a long way to the city of freedom. And yet more than that, what grabs hold is this: how Harriet, 5 feet tall, unable to read or write, with few resources, by grit and will and savvy, risked recapture and re-enslavement and death again and again in order to lead others to freedom. By foot, by night, she made this dangerous, cold, terrifying journey again and again and again. The way was long, but Harriet Tubman walked it about 15 times and led more than 70 others to freedom too. In the book, Harriet Tubman, The Road to Freedom, author Catherine Clinton wrote this, quote, "Harriet Tubman had been a liberator, a woman who stood up to the slave power, and a warrior whose actions spoke louder than words. She seized the road to freedom, not just for herself, but also for her family and others during her decade-long association with the Underground Railroad. This bravery earned her a fierce reputation. She was on the slaveholders' most wanted list with a steep price on her head. Posters with a description of Moses, as she was called, were plastered through the Upper South until the Civil War broke out," end quote. Harriet Tubman's personal courage and stamina captivates, not only because of her unusual courage before the war, or even her work to end enslavement as a spy for the North during the war, but that her work never ended. After the war, she worked until her death in Auburn to care and advocate for African Americans who were aging in poverty. She never stopped confronting racial oppression. The way was long, and she kept to it. The way is still long, and we are called to keep to it. Nearly 160 years after the Civil War ended, Greater Boston remains mired in the legacy of enslavement and racism and segregation. Graduation rates, incarceration rates, wealth, and health measures remain shaped by them. Consider infant mortality. This fall, the Boston Public Health Commission published the Maternal and Infant Health Report. In Boston, Black residents experience the highest rates of infant mortality, preterm births, and low birth weight. Infant mortality among Black babies in Boston was more than 3 times the rate for white babies. Consider housing. According to the Boston Indicators Project, 66% of Black residents are renters, double the rate of white residents. That means that more Black residents are vulnerable to the spiraling rent increases and then displacement, and cannot build the wealth that is earned through home ownership. Consider the racial wealth gap. According to the Indicators Project, racial wealth disparities have grown and not lessened over the past 30 years. Quote, in the United States, economic inequity is inextricably connected to growing racial inequity. By 2019, white wealth was almost 9 times as high as Black wealth, end quote. And then consider death. The mortality gap remains a stark reminder of racism, with a 23-year difference in life expectancy between Roxbury residents and those 1 mile away in Back Bay. Racism's stamp leaves a mark on the lives of African Americans from birth through death and at every point in between. It is these realities that the urban ministry faces in its mission to dismantle racism and white supremacy culture, and to envision a greater Boston where all its residents can shape the present and the future. And so we continue operating programs like our longtime domestic violence shelter, and we also reimagine our work for justice. We're expanding our after-school program to nurture the next generation of BIPOC leaders and creating career exploration opportunities so that young people can choose their own paths forward. We created our Community Conversations series to highlight the history and impact of racism, this season shining a light on housing. We expanded our Roxbury Tours program, celebrating the richness and history of the Roxbury community. And we're nearing completion of the full restoration of our historic meeting house as a place to celebrate and serve Roxbury. UUs from every one of our 46 member congregations like Wayland have helped us in all of these changes, and I am proud of what we've accomplished together. And there is so much more work to be done. Families in our neighborhood are getting pushed out by gentrification. Young people can't get the opportunities they need. Brilliant young people who flourished in our after-school program and graduated from college still can't find the jobs that they want. The way is long. From our reading by Cheryl Strayed, at foot speed, the Sierra Nevada seemed, just barely, surmountable. I could always take another step. It was only when I rounded a bend and glimpsed the white peaks ahead that I doubted my abilities. Only when I thought of how far I had yet to go that I lost faith that I would get there. What we need is to just take another step, and then another, and another. In our work at the Urban Ministry and in the work that we all do individually and collectively, working for justice, we need to just take another step. We need to keep walking forward even when it's daunting and steep and hard. And so I return to this question. How are you? How is your heart? What do you need to keep pressing forward for justice? This morning, I'm going to invite you to honor what you need to keep on your path in whatever ways you feel called to fight against climate change, for trans rights, to shelter immigrants, or to work for racial justice. Whatever calls you, I'm going to invite you for a moment to breathe in and think about what you need for your next step. Sometimes we need community. Harriet Tubman needed it. She was sometimes alone in her underground rescues, but she was also encouraged and sustained by a web of like-minded abolitionists. In them, she found encouragement and support. Among them was Lydia Mariah Childs. Lydia helped Harriet write letters and share her views and experiences in enslavement. The Underground Railroad itself was possible only because people committed to change worked together to form an unbroken line from enslavement to freedom. Sometimes we need to be part of a group working together for common goals to encourage one another forward. Sometimes we need community. Sometimes we need silence and to nurture our inner spiritual lives, to put down our cell phones and the pinging and the buzz and the dizzying array of headlines and breathe and connect with that which is bigger than we are. Sometimes we need to nurture the spiritual. Sometimes we need to remember that we are enough, that what we offer, our gifts, our talents, are fully sufficient for our call. Harriet could not read or write. She had few material resources, but she was smart and cunning and had charisma. She used her gifts. What gifts do we bring to the change that we seek? Artist, activist, builder, speaker, organizer, dancer, listener. Sometimes we need to remember that we are enough. And so this morning, I'm going to invite you into a communion for the activist heart. And I'm going to invite forward our 3 basket holders. Is it on? Okay. I'm going to invite you to come forward, coming through the center aisle and then exiting around the perimeter, to select something from one of these 3 baskets that represent what you need at this point on your journey. If what you need is community, I invite you to step forward and take a piece of the bark of a tree. Science tells us that trees communicate under the surface through their roots and form a community. So if what you need is community, come and take a piece of tree bark. Sometimes what we need is to nurture our inner spirituality. And if that is what you need, I invite you to come forward and take a candle if you need to nurture quiet and your own spirituality. And sometimes we need to remember that we are enough. And so if you need to remember that you are enough, come forward and accept a stone to be grounded in that remembrance. Come, come, whoever you are. Please join us. The way is long, and we must keep going even when it's muddy and rock-strewn and steep and when we're tired. The way is long, and we must keep going because the world needs us to. Change takes time and faithfulness. At foot speed, we can always take another step. Please join me in the words of our chalice extinguishing. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world until we are together again. I invite you to join with me in singing our closing hymn, number 108, My Life Flows On, an Endless Song. Go out remembering that you have gifts to give to the world that the world needs, and that the world has gifts to give you to sustain you as you go. Go out in peace, faith, and courage. Amen.